Uh, Welcome to True Hunt channel. We have got a special man with us, the man with guts. Yes, I'm talking about Lieutenant General A.K. Singh, who has served the who have served in many forms. He was a Lieutenant Governor for Andaman and Nicobar, and after that he was an administrator for Puducherry as well. So he's today with us, and he would be discussing the effective ways to run an administration. Welcome, and sir, my first question I would start from your.
Gaurav,
Yes, sir. Please.
before we start, let me compliment you for the new venture, True
Thank you.
Hunt.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
remember we talked earlier when you were with the earlier assignment,
Yes.
and I declined
Yes.
for various reasons. But I have always believed that one must encourage young people, especially with startups. And therefore, I had no hesitation in accepting your offer. And I wish you and True Hunt the very best. May you succeed in your ventures.
Thank you.
Go
Sir.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So my first question to you, from the experience that you have had in the armed forces, what are the key points that you have utilized as an administrator, which are different than the usual administrative acumen? So please.
Gaurav, this is a question that has been often asked of me when I reached Andaman Nicobar and people saw my work. So a lot of people who interviewed me or casually met me or formally met me, their first question would be, so what are those leadership traits and what are those key things that you have used to run the administration? And my answer to them then and to you today is the same. And that is that my experience is based on what I did in the great Indian Army. I rose from joining as a second lieutenant to one of the highest appointments, an army commander. I was army commander, Southern Army. I had 42% of India, 10 states, 4 UTs as my responsibility from the army. And it was an alive border also, a very challenging job. So what were the key qualities that I used in my leadership journey in the army? So first were, let's say, the basics. And the basics were high integrity, competence, commitment, and passion for my job. I repeat, integrity, competence, commitment, and a high passion for my job. The second was that the linkage, which is between responsibility, authority, and accountability, was a guiding factor. Unfortunately, this is missing in our public life. If ever anybody owns up to accountability, normally people prefer to wield authority without any accountability. But in the armed forces, this is not so. When you have responsibility, you are given requisite authority. But with that authority comes accountability, Gaurav. You are accountable for your acts, you are accountable for your acts of omission and commission. In Andaman and later in Puducherry as well, my focus was that first I got to know the islands and the UTs very well. I traveled all over. In Andaman, there's hardly any place which I have not traveled. And I shared an article you would have seen taking the chief secretary on the motorcycle or driving a jeep in a disaster management situation myself. And that's how. So people got to know me. I also got to know the people. And this was an advice given to me by the PM when I went, that you are not only a constitutional head and an administrator, but you are also the people's representative. Because Andaman, as you are aware, does not have a legislative assembly. So I got to know the islands better than most people. And you can check with anybody in the islands. I used to travel without much security, cycle around, walk in the evening. And anybody was welcome to, in an emergency, to walk into my office at any time. Can you imagine when some of the fishermen did not return in their evenings? I had given so much confidence that their families would walk in into the Rajnivas and request me to do something about it. That was the repo. Having got to know the islands, I decided as to what is the focus of my innings there. And I realized that in Andamans, there were four centers of gravity. The first was the strategic nature of these islands and the great security implications for India. The second was the people who lived there, the settlers. We had brought them from all parts of India. It's often called mini India. And therefore, we had a duty to meet their aspirations and development needs. But along with this was the need to preserve the pristine environment of Andamans. And along with that was our responsibility to the tribals of Andaman. Now, these four centers of gravity had to live in harmony with each other, had to accommodate each other, and not work at the expense of each other.
Right.
Let me give you an example. When I reached there, my chief secretary was Mr. Anand Prakash, a very good bureaucrat, high integrity, and we had a good rapport. He's no more. He passed away recently. Now, I would often call him at odd times and tell him, Anand, um, I don't find your administration and your bureaucrats responding to me with the kind of passion and speed that I demand. I said, I'm writing very clear orders on the file, so why the doubt? And he would say, yes, sir, yes, sir. Then after about 3-4 months of my being there, he came and met me. And he said, sir, from tomorrow, you will see a drastic change in the approach of the administration. So I said, Anand, what's happened overnight that everything will change? He said, sir, I was convinced, but the rest of the guys were watching you. They wanted to see that what you said, you meant the same thing, and you also wanted us to do the same thing. He says, we are used to working in an environment where our bosses would say one thing, mean another thing, and want us to do nothing. So you see the way that our environment functions.
Right.
Second example I would give was, I realized that to get specialist doctors in Andaman, which everyone had failed over the years, the only way out was to start a medical college. And it had to be done within the year. So I set about doing it. And everybody told me that, Jalal Sahab, medical college on the mainland is difficult. Aap in islands mein kahan banayenge? Everybody has tried and failed. I said no. So I got after that with a single-minded focus. And today that medical college is there. So many vested interests got hurt who would exploit the people, take them to various hospitals on the mainland. And, they complained with such gusto right up to the Honorable PM. But I must say, to the credit of the PM, never once did he doubt my intentions. And let me give you the advantage that has come to Andaman. Where we did not have adequate specialists, today we have over 100. More than that, earlier, out of the small population, we used to get 8-10 seats in the medical colleges all over India. Today, 90 children from Andaman are studying in that medical college. We are ready to export people, export medicos to the rest of the mainland. So basically, I followed the same approach. In Pondicherry, I had to follow a slightly different approach. Gaurav, I am by nature a very positive, very, somebody who seeks outputs, um, timely outputs, and I want to see results. In Pondicherry, I realized that there is a chief minister and a council of ministers, and therefore I had to take a slightly back seat. But I kept my finger on the pulse and would periodically meet the CM. And I had a wonderful rapport with the present CM, who was then also with me, Mr. Rangasamy. And we would meet very often. We would travel together, and we had no problem whatsoever. We had a very healthy relationship.
We would like to listen from you, like few instances from your tenure in the Indian Army as a lieutenant general, which are imprinted in your memory. Like you have got some thoughts to share about it, because of course you have majorly served the Indian Armed Forces, sir.
Okay. Gaurav, I joined the Indian Army as a young officer at the age of 20 plus and retired after 40 years service, attaining one of the highest ranks, Army Commander. So the Indian Army is my vajood. It has given me so much in life. In fact, I say that whatever I have got is thanks to the Indian Army. Of course, your family, friends play a part, your environment plays a part. And I'm very conscious that this is payback time. And so wherever I can pay back to the Indian Army in whatever form, I'm always ready and willing. And let me explain this vajood bit. Often, my wife and son would tell me, Dad, you have retired now. Now, why are you so concerned about the Indian? And my answer to him was that the Indian Army is my vajood. How can I just walk away? And he said, explain to me. So I said, just go on the Google and type A.KSingh. He typed, and there were 100,000 A.KSinghs who came up.
Yes.
I said, now please type Lieutenant General A.KSingh, not even Indian Army, not even India. And one name came up with 20, 30 pages. I said, that is what I mean, that this is my vajood. Let me share a few incidents. It's difficult in a short interview, but I'll just touch upon a few. I've always been an operational man, always serving in operational assignments, including the Mecca of the Indian Army, the Military Operation Directorate, where I held 3 desks over my tenure. And what gave me an edge over everyone else was a very clear understanding of military strategy and operational art. And how did I get it? At a very young age, about 6 years service, I was detailed to do a course in Moscow. It was called the Tank Troops Command and Staff Course. And shortly thereafter, 2 years later, in 1984-85, I was detailed to do my staff college in United Kingdom at Cambridge. You know, we have a staff college exam, and 2 officers who top it go to Cambridge. So at the height of Cold War, I was exposed to 2 contrasting systems, Gaurav, and that gave me a very deep insight into the domain of strategy, doctrine, and operational art. And I've always been very, very at ease with these subjects. In fact, most plans for the Western Front were written by me. Let me talk of a small incident when I was a colonel. I was a director in Military Operation Directorate, and I was responsible for the operational readiness and capability development of the Indian Army. And the attack on Parliament happened, and the Indian Armed Forces were mobilized. Uh, I remember that I was detailed to go and take over a brigade that was converting to T-90 tanks. But before that, an issue came up of shortage of ammunition for tanks. And the then chief, General Padmanabhan, asked for a review. And there was, in the Military Operation Directorate Ops room, the hierarchy of the Indian Army assembled. The chief, vice chief were there, and the Master General of Ordnance gave a presentation of how, yes, there was shortage of tank ammunition, but within 1 week, we are getting so much from Ordnance Factory Board. Within 15 days, we'll get another 100,000 and the shortage will pass. So the chief made a wry remark. He said, so MGO is telling me that as your chief, I need not take a discipline as yet. So everybody laughed and we moved to the next agenda. I was in the last row. I raised my voice and said, "Sir, can I say something?" So I was called to the front and he said, "Yes." I said, "Sir, I'm your Director MO5, responsible for the operational capability development and readiness of the Indian Army." He said, "Yes, I know. Say your piece." I said, "Sir, I accept that the chief need not take a discipline as yet. But as your Director MO5, I would strongly recommend that you keep a discipline and a glass of water next to your bedside and on your office table." He looked at me. I said, "Sir, let me explain." I said, "Sir, the problem is that the ammunition which is coming out of the Ordnance Factory Board has been rejected earlier. And the solution is based on the same ammunition. What will happen if the next lot also gets rejected?" I said, "We'll go to battle without ammunition." So the point I'm trying to say is that in serious matters, at senior ranks, people must have the gumption to tell truth to power, to stand up for their conviction, which is becoming a rare commodity today. Another, when I went and took over an armored brigade in Parakram, we were in Rajasthan, and my brigade was tasked to go deep inside. But along with that, I was given the responsibility to convert the brigade to T90 tanks in the heat of the desert. Temperatures would soar to 50 degrees, and apart from my operational responsibility, I converted the three regiments from T72 to T90. It was an experience that I enjoyed and felt that it was a worthwhile contribution. As GOC Strike 1 or 1 Corps, which I had the privilege to command, we carried out one of the largest exercises ever done in India called Jodha Shakti. And that also in the middle of summers. Again, in the month of May, June, we had almost more than 1,000 tanks and other vehicles, plus almost 100,000 troops out in the desert. I was there throughout the period. And I can say that at the end of that, one felt confident that if ever the chance comes to roll out and carry out operations, we would succeed. I was sure of that. And then as Army Commander, the job was different. We had our operational responsibility and we did another large-scale maneuver, exercise Sudarshan Shakti. But a large amount of focus of mine was also devoted to the 54 camps and military stations that came in my area. It was a Herculean responsibility, especially with land mafia prevalent in most stations. And to clip their wings, we started digitizing the records so that no manipulation could take place. And there were
Sir, the next question takes me, of course, sir, hats off to you for your commendable work as an Indian armed personnel. Puducherry has a unicameral legislature with 33 seats. Now, drawing a parallel with a UT of Delhi for the benefit of the easier understanding of our viewers, I would like to ask you that Delhi is also a union territory and also also has a legislative assembly. Center is time and again blamed for interfering in the decisions and the policy of the elected legislator in Delhi. And the things especially took an exceptional turn during the tenure of Shri Najib Jung, who was also a governor, sir. And I would like to further take my question that center is time and again blamed in interfering in the decisions and policies of the elected legislature in Delhi, and the things especially took an exceptional turn, as I said, during the tenure of Shri Najib Jung, vice versa, Aam Aadmi Party government held by Shri Kejriwal. In light of the same, what is your take on the autonomy that needs to be given to the legislature of the union territory, and how has been the trend of the center versus the territorial legislature of Puducherry? Because as we have served as an administrator, sir.
Gaurav, I will speak from my experience and
Yes.
would not like to comment on what others did. So just as a background, we must understand that India is composed of today 28 states and 8 UTs. This
Yes.
figure has kept changing. A large number of states in Northeast were union territories, and they later were upgraded to states. Similarly, J&K, which was a state, was recently turned into two UTs. Now, the union territory, by definition, that is why it is called a union territory. For specific reasons, for special reasons, it comes directly under the central government. It is administered on behalf of the president through the prime minister, the home minister, MHA, and then in the union territories, you have an administrator. The smaller union territories just have an administrator, while the larger ones have a lieutenant governor who's partly a constitutional authority and also an administrator. Now, within the large UTs also, there are two types. Andaman is very unique in that the lieutenant governor is the sole authority. There is no assembly in Andaman Nicobar. There's just one member of parliament, and then we have the Panchayati Raj and Municipal Corporation in Port Blair. So virtually bulk of the powers vest in the lieutenant governor, and those are specified. And beyond that, those powers, you have to go to the central government, MHA, or a concerned ministry to get approval. Some UTs, like you have presently in Delhi and Puducherry, a partial statehood had been granted to these two. If you remember, Delhi was initially a state, then for good reasons turned into a union territory, and later partial statehood has been granted, which means that while the lieutenant governor enjoys the powers, there is also a unicameral assembly which has a chief minister, council of ministers, MLAs, etc., and regular elections take place. Now, bulk of the powers, including financial powers, are delineated as to what can the council of ministers do and what it cannot do. For what it requires the approval of the lieutenant governor, and for what the UT has to go to the central government to get approval. So yes, there are few ambiguous areas, and that is where the personality of the chief minister and the lieutenant governor comes in.
Right.
If both realize, and I repeat, if both of them realize and are conscious of the fact that they are there to serve the people of the union territory, there is no other reason for them to be there. So if they are there to serve the people of the union territory and ensure that the union territory develops and progresses, then it is incumbent on both of them to live and be in harmony with each other and push the development of and aspirations of the people of that union territory. Let me tell you, I was fortunate to be Lieutenant Governor of Andaman, where all powers vested in me, and also in Puducherry, where my predecessor, Mr. Kataria, was asked to leave because there was a problem like Delhi that was happening between him and the Chief Minister and the Chief Secretary. Let me tell you, in 2 years that I stayed, please check with anyone in Puducherry, any of the departments, any officer, anyone. I had the most cordial relationship with Mr. Rangaswamy, who's today also the Chief Minister. I hold him in very good regard and vice versa. He was aware that I will not do anything that is not legally permissible. And therefore, he never pushed me on those things. And wherever we both felt that something had to be done and that the powers did not vest with us, so we had to take up a case with the Ministry of Home Affairs and sometimes even with the PMO. Some of those cases that we took up were granted, some were not. That's how administration is. So we tried again. So I think the key is the personality and those two people who are there. They need to realize that their responsibility is to the people of that union territory, and therefore friction will derail the government. I cannot believe, though one also reads that the center is interfering and giving direction. From my own experience, Gaurav, I can say that in my 3 years plus in two union territories, there was not a single instance where I was told to do something which was not in the interest of the union territory. Of course, I consulted the central government. I kept them informed of all my actions. Sometimes I had a lot of meetings with all the different ministries, met the PM a number of times, but the discussion was never on how to derail the government. It was always how to take the administration forward. So, if a peculiar thing has happened in Delhi, I would just say that both the incumbents need to look within rather than blame the central government.
Well said, sir. So
Now,
my
your second part, Gaurav, of your question was, do
yes,
we need to give more independence to the
right,
union
right, sir,
territories?
right.
Let me say, in Andaman, there was always a yearning to have an assembly. The population is just 4 lakhs, spread over so many 37 islands, over 700 kilometers. It was not a feasible proposition. So we had the Lieutenant Governor's Advisory Council. And therefore, people will always desire more and more powers. But the UT has been made a UT for a special reason. And therefore, my view would be that there should be greater financial autonomy and support given to the union territory rather than independence or turning into a state. Well, you have some cases, like let's say you have J&K today, Ladakh. I don't know Ladakh, but J&K at some stage will have elections and will the center may consider giving it back statehood. So these are dependent on case to case basis. As you are aware, Delhi is a special case. It is the seat of a union government. And therefore, there are many views, but my view is that a fine balance needs to be uh, kept in Delhi, which is the.
So this was Lieutenant General A.K. Singh with us, and this was the first part of the session. And now he will be joining us in the second part as well. And we would like to continue with the session. So stay tuned.